Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today we're taking a closer and more thoughtful look at Qatar's condemnation of the Israeli strikes on Gaza, and what this reaction means for the region, for diplomacy, and for the people living through this ongoing conflict. This situation is sensitive, emotional, and heavily political, so in this video style script we're going to break everything down in simple, clear, and short paragraphs to help you understand the full picture. Qatar has long positioned itself as one of the strongest supporters of the Palestinian cause, and because of that, its statements carry a lot of weight. When Qatar condemned the Israeli strikes on Gaza, the message wasn't just a reaction to violence. It was a direct and forceful expression of frustration, anger, and concern. Qatar described the strikes as a blatant violation of international law and a dangerous escalation that threatens the entire region. That tone was deliberate, signaling to the world that what happens in Gaza doesn't stay in Gaza. It affects everyone in the Middle East. The condemnation also reflects Qatar's unique role in the region. Unlike many countries, Qatar has maintained open channels with multiple sides in the conflict. It communicates with Palestinian factions, with Western countries, and even with Israel when necessary. Because of its neutral and communicative position, Qatar has often been at the center of ceasefire negotiations and humanitarian arrangements. When Qatar says the Israeli strikes undermine peace efforts, it comes from direct involvement. It's not speculation, it's experience. The strikes on Gaza have caused enormous destruction and loss of life, and Qatar's response was shaped by the humanitarian dimension as well. Qatar has been one of the main contributors of aid to Gaza, sending financial assistance, medical supplies, and reconstruction funds. Every new wave of strikes not only undoes previous humanitarian efforts, but also intensifies the suffering of civilians who are already living under extremely difficult conditions. Qatar's condemnation highlights this suffering and calls on the global community to recognize the human cost beyond the political narratives. At the same time, Qatar's statement reflects the growing frustration in the region about the lack of progress toward a long-term solution. Each round of violence feels like a repetition of the last, with no meaningful steps toward peace. Qatar, like many other countries in the Middle East, believes that military action cannot resolve the conflict and that a political solution is the only way forward. The condemnation is also a reminder that continued strikes only push that political solution further out of reach. Another important element of Qatar's reaction is the emphasis on international law. Qatar has repeatedly argued that actions in Gaza must be evaluated against global legal frameworks, especially those protecting civilians in conflict zones. When Qatar calls the strikes a violation, it's calling attention to the importance of accountability. Qatar wants the world to uphold the same standards of justice everywhere, regardless of which side is involved. Qatar also focuses on the impact of the strikes on regional stability. The Middle East is already dealing with economic challenges, political tensions, and conflicts in multiple countries. Adding more instability threatens not just Gaza but nearby nations, trade routes, and diplomatic negotiations. Qatar is warning that escalation in Gaza could spill beyond its borders, triggering a wider and more destructive confrontation. Part of Qatar's condemnation is also tied to its own national reputation as a mediator. Qatar has invested decades in building diplomatic credibility. When violence increases, ceasefires collapse, or peace negotiations stall, Qatar's role becomes more complicated. The strikes on Gaza make it harder for Qatar to facilitate dialogue, because one side perceives itself under attack while the other continues to defend its actions. Qatar views this as harmful not only to Palestinians, but also to diplomacy as a whole. The emotional tone of Qatar's condemnation cannot be separated from the long history of the crisis. For many people in Qatar and across the Arab world, the Palestinian issue is not just political, it is deeply personal and emotional. Images from Gaza, stories of families under rubble, and the destruction of homes and hospitals strike a nerve. Qatar's leadership speaks from a place of shared grief and solidarity, reflecting the emotions of its population. Qatar also uses its condemnation as a way to urge the international community to step up. Many countries issue statements, but few take concrete action. Qatar consistently calls for stronger international intervention, whether that means pressure to stop the strikes, support for ceasefire negotiations, or humanitarian aid. The message is clear. Words of sympathy are not enough. Action is needed now. Another layer to the condemnation involves Qatar's message to Israel. Qatar is saying that these actions are counterproductive and damaging. Not only do they cause suffering in Gaza, but they also destroy any trust needed for political dialogue. Qatar's message is that no military strike will solve the deeper issues at the heart of the conflict, and continuing down this path only hardens positions on both sides. There's also a deeper geopolitical reading of Qatar's reaction. Qatar wants to protect its standing in the international community and maintain its influence. Speaking out strongly against the strikes reinforces Qatar's identity as a defender of human rights, a vocal supporter of Palestine, and a country that does not shy away from addressing global injustices. This strengthens Qatar's relations with other Arab nations, and with populations across the region who admire countries that take firm stances. Qatar's condemnation also draws attention to the humanitarian crisis that follows every strike: the destruction of infrastructure, the shortage of electricity and water, the collapse of medical services, and the trauma inflicted on children all contribute to long-term suffering. Qatar wants the world to understand that Gaza is not simply a battlefield. It is a community of families, students, workers, and children who deserve safety and dignity. In its statements, Qatar often calls for immediate humanitarian corridors to allow aid to enter Gaza. These corridors are essential for delivering food, medical care, and shelter. Qatar insists that humanitarian access must never be restricted, especially during heavy strikes. The condemnation is meant to push world leaders to prioritize the protection of civilians over military strategy. Qatar's strong position also reflects the failure of previous ceasefire attempts. Each time Qatar helps mediate a truce, violence resumes sooner or later. This cycle creates frustration and disappointment, and Qatar's condemnation signals its dissatisfaction with a lack of commitment to lasting peace. For Qatar, a ceasefire is not just a pause in violence. It is a chance to build momentum toward a permanent solution. Another key aspect of the condemnation is the appeal for accountability. Qatar believes that all parties responsible for violations of international law should face consequences. This is not about politics, it is about fairness. Whether the violation is committed by a state or a non-state actor, the response should be the same. Qatar wants the world to move toward a system where accountability is the norm, not the exception. Qatar also uses its platform to amplify the voices of Palestinians who often feel unheard. Through its condemnation, Qatar gives visibility to their suffering and their calls for justice. This advocacy is part of Qatar's long-standing support for Palestinian rights, including political representation, self-determination, and protection from violence. The condemnation also serves as a reminder that global crises are interconnected. The longer the violence continues in Gaza, the more it affects global markets, refugee flows, political alliances, and international institutions. Qatar is warning the world that ignoring Gaza has consequences far beyond the region. Stability anywhere supports stability everywhere. Qatar's response is also shaped by the fact that it has relationships with major global powers. It hosts Western military bases, collaborates with European and Asian countries, and maintains diplomatic ties across continents. When Qatar issues a strong condemnation, it signals to those partners that the situation in Gaza is a priority issue that affects its foreign policy decisions. Ultimately, Qatar's condemnation is a call for humanity. It is a plea to stop the violence, protect civilians, and return to dialogue. Qatar is saying that peace cannot be achieved through force. Peace requires understanding, negotiation, and compromise. The strikes on Gaza only push peace further away. Thank you for watching and listening through this detailed script. I hope this gives you a deeper understanding of why Qatar's condemnation carries so much importance and what it means for the region and the world. If you found this explanation helpful, make sure to like and subscribe, and feel free to share your thoughts in the comments. Until next time, stay informed and stay safe.